Hey everyone, welcome to Seattle Cocktail Club's Gin Week. I'm Amy. We are at event number 2, and tonight is going to be a really exciting night because we are going to learn to make some Opihr cocktails. So pull out your cocktail kit that you picked up at the tin table, grab some supplies, and before we get started, I want to introduce our cocktail master, instructor, you name it, title of the day, and that is Sonder from the Tin Table, and he's going to talk us through things. A little bit of housekeeping. I see that we've already got one comment up there in the chat. As we're going through things tonight, if we're going too fast or too slow or anything like that, by all means, let us know, because we're here because we want to show you how to make really great cocktails at home. And if you have any questions, we're going to do a Q&A a little bit throughout, and then we'll probably wrap up any questions that you have at the end. So send those questions into the chat. It makes our job a lot easier and more enjoyable, and it gives you the education. If you have the question in your head, somebody else probably has it as well. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Sonder from the Tin Table, and I'm going to let him take it from here. Hi, Sonder. How are you?
Hi, Amy, and hi, everybody else. I am doing wonderful. It was such a beautiful day today. I was very lucky to be up on Camano Island just before I head down to Seattle. It was just gorgeous. I was like, summer's here, very, very close. So yeah, as Amy said, my name is Sonder. I am the bar manager at the Tin Table and Century Ballroom on Capitol Hill. I've been managing here for just over 5 years now. As far as my experience in the scene of cocktails and flavors and so forth. I've been a bartender since I was in my 20s, which was not 5 years ago. It might look like it, but it's definitely not. 1985 is the year I was born. So it's been quite a few years. I've bartended here in the US and in Seattle. I've done a lot of competitions. I've bartended in Estonia, in Europe. So I have a lot of experience in creating different cocktails, doing presentations, and I've been running online and also in-person classes since about 2013. This is our first collaboration here together with Amy and Jessica for Seattle Cocktail Week. So super thrilled to be here. I think a lot of you, well, at least I think half of you got to see me or our owner, Hallie, when you picked up the kids here at the Tin Table. And we even had some people who stayed for dinner. So that was super awesome. I'm glad you guys stayed and hung out with us for a little bit. And once we get everything sorted out here, we got our new floors. Some of you who walked upstairs saw, we're kind of in the middle of construction, and we have the dining in the ballroom. So really hoping once we get everything sorted, we get the dances going on, and we really want to see everybody back here again. And who knows, we might be doing some more classes with Seattle Cocktail Week coming up. So that's about me. Obviously, like I said, I have a lot of experience doing this, and I really, really enjoy it because I love just having this conversation with people and just kind of telling them, this is how bartenders think. This is how we see flavors and cocktails and products. And definitely give me all the questions, okay? I'm waiting for the questions. I want to have a dialogue here. I want you to be invested into this class and take something away from it, right? So as Amy mentioned, put your questions in the chat. I will kind of spew out a lot of information. Amy, don't look at me like that. I will go slowly, as slow as I can. But I'm going to kind of glide over different topics, and I won't stop, but I will make appropriate pauses. So if you have a question about something, just hold on to it, put it in the chat, and once we create the pause, I'll go back and re-explain everything. Because one of my key things, I want to get a cocktail in your hands pretty soon, so I don't want to spend a lot of time on Q&A now. So at least we get the first drink going, and we'll get there. If you have not gotten your tools out, we are going to go pretty fast into handling a knife and a lime and a cutting board. So if you have not juiced your lime yet, that is great. If you have, it's not a big deal. At least you have lime juice. So make sure you have this ready. Maybe have a little glass as well, because right after this next section, we're going to make a little garnish out of this and juice the rest of the lime. And if you don't have a juicer, I don't have one either. Well, I do, but I'm just going to pretend I don't. So I'm going to juice with you as we do this using my bare hands, just to show you that it is possible. Okay, so let's just jump right into gin real quick. So gin, the most used period in classical cocktails, and for a good reason. It really works with everything. It works beautifully in stirred, savory cocktails, shaken fresh cocktails, and it just has such a wide array of flavors that you can really pull in from all different sides. And there's, like I said, a very good reason why it's so loved. And I love gin. The history of gin, there's a lot to it. I'm not going to stop a lot of it on it extensively, but gin comes from the Dutch word genever, where it morphed into London dry style gin in England. And over the time, it became more juniper forward when it became the London dry style as we know it now. And in the past 20 years, we've definitely, like 15, 20 years, we've seen this huge resurrection of like different botanical builds and like how the category has really evolved, which has been super cool. I definitely remember when I started bartending, and I had 3 gins. That was it. There was nothing else. And now my gin shelf looks really sad behind me. I only have like 10. We usually have about 30 different gins in my bar, because like we said, we're big fans. And Opihr definitely for me falls into this like new style that's contemporary, experimental, and then like just a really different style of a gin. So we're definitely going to dwell into that flavor profile and everything. If you have not tasted it or smelt it, now is a good time. You have your little bottle. Just pop it open, take a little sip. I'm not judging, but just start smelling it as we talk and see what are the flavors you can kind of pick out from here. There's of course some notes in the back of the bottle, so you can definitely cheat a little bit and see what's in there. But as the name suggests, there's a lot of Oriental spices here. So once again, feel free just to be at your home there, take a sip, take a little smell, and have fun with this.
We actually had Opihr in the blind tasting event that we did last night, and it's amazing how different the notes are when somebody compares this to a regular gin. So they're tasting like notes of cumin and like things that you wouldn't normally expect in a gin, which is kind of fun to see how versatile like the whole category of gin can be and how different Opihr really is. I do want to address something that already came up in the chat. We sent out an email telling people to juice the lime ahead of time.
Okay.
So
no worries.
Some people got lucky and found a lime in the fridge so they could do the happy dance, but there's others that juiced it and tossed it, and that is our fault.
So if you do have it still, the garnish itself, it's really simple, but I just thought I would just bring it up beforehand. So I'm just going to show this real quick. It's very easy to replicate. So what you do is, before you juice your lime, you just cut it in half. Very easy, and we'll just cut a wheel out of it. So you don't want the wheel to be too thick because we're going to bend it. And you don't want it to be too thin either. So I'm just going to cut this here. I'm going to bring it as close to the camera as I can. So this is a nice little wheel here. And this is one of my favorite ways to make garnishes because it's very effective and also allows you to attach other things. So I'm going to just bend it like this. And then I go to the flesh side of it, and I do almost like a 45 angle cut in the flesh side of it. Now it has this little mouth part here, so which allows you to attach it to the rim of a glass. And it will work on any glass, cocktail coupe, rocks glass. What I love about this is it does not fall in the drink, and it looks different than just the simple lime wedge does. And it's beautiful. Just it sits right here. And this is what I really love about this garnish is, so for example, for our first cocktail, if you wanted to garnish it with some extra cardamom or mint, since now you have this little pocket in here between the glass and the little citrus slice, you can just like stuff any kind of herbs in here, additional garnishes, umbrellas. So it really opens up that window of like putting a garnish, especially in a coupe, which is very difficult. And I am personally not a big fan when I have garnishes in my drink. Sometimes it works out really well, oftentimes not so much. So this really allows you to play with like different kind of herbs, especially like with mint or thyme, which on a cocktail coupe can be really hard to attach to it. You might have to get a little clothespin. So this garnish is just, that's your way out of it. You can always use that. And since you all have already juiced yours, so I'm not going to stop on this too much longer, but even if you don't have a juicer, just kind of rolling the lime a little bit and then just using your hands, you can get just enough juice out of one lime that is going to be appropriate for this cocktail, which is about 3/4 ounce. Most of these limes were pretty nice and fresh. They should at least give you half to 3/4 ounce of lime juice, which is just sufficient for this one. Okay. So Opihr gin. So I don't know how much you know about the gin history. So I'm sorry about this particular product. The really cool facts. It is a woman-owned and run establishment or distillery, and it is developed by a woman. Her name is Joanne Moore, and she is absolutely fabulous. There's a whole product line of really innovative flavor profiles of gins that she has put out. This happens to be just my favorite, which is like super cool because I'm really happy to work with it. And like I said, she kind of goes to this realm of like being more experimental and like, yes, there is always going to be juniper, there's always going to be coriander, but like taking that extra step and be like, let's be a little bit experimental, let's go with it a little bit even risky and like try something different. And that's what really comes through here. So for our first cocktail, we're gonna make this southeast side cocktail, which is a variation of the south side cocktail, which I'll stop on it after we make the drink, and we'll talk about that a bit more. So with that being said, we're gonna move right into the bit where we're gonna grab our shaker tins and start shaking. So before we start doing that, though, like I said, I don't know where everybody is with their experience here, and what kind of tools you have. So I'm just gonna really briefly stop on these, and I'll give you a break later to ask more questions. So the two kind of shaker tins you might have are going to be the cobbler, aka the 3-piece, very loved by home bartenders and me at home, and also Japanese bartenders. And what you commonly see in bars, which is a Boston style, or usually you would have a pint glass and a tin. I have a tin on tin, which is just a little bit lighter and easier to use. The reason why American bars like to use these is they're much faster. And you can hold 2 or 3 at a time, versus the cobbler, although it has an extra piece which makes straining much easier. It's just more time consuming. And like I said, it is much loved by Japanese bartenders who will take the time to make the cocktail, because for them, it's all about the process. And we're in America, it's like, let's make things happen. Like, let's bust out those drinks real quick. Let's make them good. But we want to be like, there's a different approach to the process of making cocktails. So whichever you have, either of them work. If you're not familiar, the tin on tin or Boston, when you close it, put it in an angle, do a little tap. Do not go too hard, because I've done this. Sometimes you can't get them open. You do not really need to tap this one. And whenever you shake, just make sure you cover both sides of the shaker tin. However you want to do it, just make sure you have one finger at the bottom, one at the top, 2 palms, like whatever it is. That just makes for a secure way for you to hold it, because it will get slippery. And if you're shaking hard at your house and it pops off your hand, well, first of all, you might hurt someone. Secondly, you lose the booze. I'm like, no one's winning here. Nobody, right? So just make sure you have a good grip on it. So just try to get both of the sides covered.
If someone doesn't have a shaker at home, what's a good substitute if you're caught without a shaker?
Tupperware works. Nice big Tupperware. So all kinds of sports bottles. Anything that has a bit of a bigger mouth that you can just fit ice in. That's all you need. Sports bottles are probably the best ones. You can even use a mason jar. I've done that. It's a little bit riskier because it is glass, and if you shake as hard as I do, a little iffy there. Also, shaking is supposed to burn calories. So if shaking is not hard for you, I don't think you're doing it correctly. Like, think of shake weights, like, go for it. And I wanted to stop on jiggers really quick as well. I just wanted to show a couple of different options. So what you see in bars a lot, especially the fancier ones, these are called Japanese style. They are nice and conical, very flashy. They're great to use, but they do take a long time to get used to, because you need a lot of dexterity. The ends of it, they're not particularly wide. For home use, these are probably my favorites, especially when you start off. I have 2 OXOs. They're basically like tiny measuring cups. One of them is metal, one of them is a see-through one. And these are very easy to use. They have very, very clear markings on the inside. You have everything from tablespoons to ounces, and you have a nice wide mouth, so you can just like put it down, and you can almost sometimes build a whole cocktail in here and then just pour it in. And then you can get something fun like this, which is very similar to the OXO. It has little like serrated, it has edges, so I can clearly see how much I'm pouring in here. Like a great showpiece, again, if you want to show off a little, if you're not just in your kitchen alone. But those are a couple of the options. If you do not have a jigger, what I recommend is using a shot glass for anything that is as cylindrical as possible. It is not conical, because if you have something that goes up like a martini shell, it's really hard to eyeball like how accurate it is. So you definitely want to have something like this. And if you can measure it out, you know this is 1 ounce. Well, the half of it is going to be half an ounce. Quarter of this is going to be quarter ounce. So using a shot glass is the best way to go. And you can just kind of think about how you will change the recipe into parts instead of having actual measurements even. Okay, do we have any questions at this point about any of the tools or anything that I mentioned or about shaking? Looking good? All right, well, let's start shaking. So hold off with your ice, everybody. Ice goes last. So there's 2 ways bartenders like to build drinks. Some bartenders like to go from smallest ingredients to the largest. I usually go from largest, or like I start with the main spirit and go from there. Because I rarely make mistakes. It is definitely safer to start with the smallest ingredients just in case you mess up. But we have 3 ingredients. Fingers crossed, we're going to be okay. So you have your 4-ounce Opihr gin bottle, so the tiny ones. If you have a full bottle that is not 4 ounces, that's way more. So you can just literally pour half of it in there, and that'll be your count that you want. It'll be just about 2 ounces. And as I said, I'm just going to play along here. I'm going to do half an ounce, half of this bottle. That's a pretty good half. Next up, we have our house-made mint and cardamom syrup. And I'll be happy to answer any questions about how I made that later. Just like put it in the chat. I don't want to stop on it right now because I want everybody to have a drink in their hand. And this is exactly measured out 3/4 of an ounce. So if you know that your palate runs drier, pour 3/4 of this bottle in. Otherwise, let's go with the whole bottle. This is 1-on-1 simple syrup. So it is not super sweet. But like I said, if you have a little bit of a drier palate, you might want to consider just having a little bit less of it in there. And then pour in your lime juice. However much you have it, I think all you have in there should be perfect. I didn't get too much out of mine, so I'm going to add a little extra here. Okay, ready to shake? Make sure you have your glass ready, have your ice ready. And I apologize, from my end, it is definitely going to be loud right now. And this is about how long we want to shake. About give or take 10 seconds. Always a good sign is you can see all the frost on the outside, like you know it's cold in there. So if you have a strainer, or if you use a three-piece cobbler will already have a strainer in it. Very convenient. That's why I love this for home use, because I can just forego the strainer part. If you use a tin-on-tin shaker tin, you might want to use a Hawthorne strainer, which you just place on top and then pour it out. If you don't have that, but you have a shaker, you can do what we call a club pour, which was known for like using like nightclubs and stuff where you don't want to have the extra piece. I can literally just crack the tin a little bit and just pour it out from here. It might take a little practice. But there we go. Dump your ice. Garnish it with the lime wheel here. If you don't have a garnish, that's fine. You can even use the kaffir and lime leaf here as well. Works perfectly well because you might have 1 or 2. You can even just like rub it around the edge a little bit. And here you go. We have the Southeast Side cocktail.
So we had a question come in, and it seems that because you're such a good bartender, you added the ice really quickly and a couple people missed it. But basically, you added the ice right before you started shaking the tin, correct?
Yes.
And do you want to tell people why you add the ice at the very last part as opposed to when you first get started?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the main reason is dilution. So we want to control that as much as possible, and especially when you're bartending, or even if you're at home and you have kids around or pets or whatever, if you put the ice in there first and then you adding your ingredients and then the second ingredient in, all of a sudden your dog snatches the burger off the plate and you're gonna run after it. Well, what's gonna happen to the drink? Nothing. It's just gonna start diluting in there. So we want to really avoid that. So that's the reason why we build the drink in there. So I always make sure everything is in here, it's ready to go. Then I scoop my ice and make sure it comes out just perfect every time.
I'm looking in the chat and I'm really sad that I didn't make a cocktail along with you guys because I'm getting comments like, that is amazing. It tastes like summer to go with your sunny day today. And and what's the name of the cocktail that we just made? It is the Southeast Side.
East Side cocktail, which is a great segue. So this this cocktail is really called the South Side cocktail, which is a very old drink. I think the first mention was in the early 1900s, 1916ish or something like that. And the South Side cocktail is consisting of gin, lime juice, simple syrup, and mint leaves. And you just shake it and you serve it up. Now, if you're at home, you can tell me what that drink actually is. What is the name of this drink originally if you don't think of the drink name? Take the mint leaves out, and you can yell it at the camera right now because no one can hear you, so it's totally fine, or you can put it in the chat. But the answer is that this cocktail is actually a sour, or even a gimlet variation. So all this is a simple gin sour with a couple of mint leaves added to it. And that's what a South Side is. And there's a lot of riffs on this too. So for example, if I take this drink right now, which is in my hand, and I'm going to pour it right into this flute, and then I'm going to top it up with a soda water. Now, once again, at your homes, yell at the screen. I know what this is. Of course, this is nothing else but a fizz now. This is a South Side fizz. Now, if I would take a Collins glass, and I would put some ice in there. This glass is called a Collins or a chimney, or there's various different names for this glass. And I will pour this over the rocks here. Now this is just I would say a Southside Collins. Because the difference between a Tom Collins and a fizz is basically one is served up and one is not. They're otherwise almost identical. Now if I would take this Southeast Side cocktail or Southside cocktail and I would top it off with sparkling wine or champagne, it is, well, that's basically a French 75 variation, also known as a Royal Fizz. Yeah, if you use bubble like champagne instead of a soda water, it's called the Royal Fizz. So little fun pieces of information. So how you can see how cocktails can really adding one ingredient, how they develop and how they become something completely different. Although they all kind of have the same base.
We talked last night when we were doing the blind gin tasting about how people's tastes are all different. If we all liked exactly the same thing, the grocery store would be a much smaller building. And so I can see there's a couple of there was a comment that came in that's like, oh, this would be yummy with soda water. So these variations, you can tell what speaks to you and go in that direction. We do have a couple of questions about the syrup that went in. And you said that you would share the actual recipe for it. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to share this. So before I get into it, there's many different ways for you to make syrups. And believe me, there's going to be people say that, hey, this is the right way, or don't do these techniques. The truth is there's a lot of different ways, and it's really kind of up to you on how do you make it. So the way I made this syrup was I made a simple syrup, and it was just about a quart or 1 liter of simple syrup, and I did about almost a full cup of green cardamom pods. I brought it to a simmer, but actually went to a boil because I was distracted. I pulled it off, I let it cool down, and I let it sit in the fridge. I pulled it off, I let it cool down for an hour or two. Then I took the cardamom pods out, and I put that simple syrup in the fridge. I reserved a little bit of that simple syrup and covered the cardamoms with it. So essentially, I made 2 syrups just because I could. So what you have is the simpler part of it. So the ones that pull the cardamom seeds out. The second part, why I left the cardamom pods in a different little simple syrup, is I just wanted to see what happens if it sits there for 24 hours. So whenever you make syrups, use the same technique. Make 2. Don't make 1. Just try it out. See how flavors change just in a 24-hour period. So the next day, 24 hours, after that syrup has been just cooling and the other one infusing, I just took a big handful of mint leaves and I put it in a bullet blender with about half the simple syrup, and I pulsed it. And then mixed all the syrup together and then strained it out so I get all the solids out. Now, the downsides of this technique are once you blend mint, you are going to bring out a lot of those grassy vegetal notes. And you can tell that that's the case with this syrup as well. When I nose this, I'm like, yes, there's mint, and also this syrup is now about 4 or 5 days old, which also adds to it. But blending it's a very efficient way of adding flavor, but you are always going to pull out a bit more of that vegetal note. So if you wanted to stay with really, really clean mint, you just want to put it in the syrup and just taste it as you go every hour. And once it gets too vegetal, you just pull the mint out. I hope this answers your question, because like I said, there's many different ways to do it. And I just went with I wanted to get the green color and I wanted to get a lot of flavor. So that's the technique that I used.
And then the other comment that came in the chat that kind of made me giggle is they said that it looked like you were doing magic tricks with the cocktail where you were changing one into another, which is kind of true.
Next time I'll get a top hat.
Oh, and a bunny. You're going to have to pull a bunny and a cocktail out.
And it's a Collins. Yes. Look at that.
Yes, please. Mm-hmm. All right. Overall, it sounds like people are already looking at using things like elderflower soda and grapefruit tonic and things like that. One of my favorite ways to have Opihr, because I'm kind of lazy, and this is probably blasphemy from somebody that's with Seattle Cocktail Club, but I like a good gin and tonic, and making it with the Fever Tree elderflower tonic.
Yeah, absolutely.
So easy and so great.
Yep, all day. The simplicity. I mean, having a good quality tonic water and a good quality gin, it's amazing. Absolutely. I think gin and tonics are still I wouldn't say guilty pleasure, but I'll go with a dive bar and order one. I don't care. Like, even if it's not the best tonic, I still kind of like it. I'll drink it. I'm not mad about it.
I feel like it's a pretty safe choice from a dive bar too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it is. Yeah. It sure is. Safer than a Manhattan is.
Exactly. We did a class a couple weeks ago for Brandy Week and did a Wisconsin old fashioned.
Yes, with the muddled orange and everything.
Yeah.
Well, how was it? What do you think? I mean, it wasn't really that terrible, was it?
It was actually really, really great because we used really good brandy from it. So.
And good cherries?
And good cherries as opposed to...
That's what makes a difference. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's a great way to, what you just brought up is even a cocktail that, a snooty bartenders right now might look at it as like, that's silly. Why would you muddle it in there? But it is a style of cocktail and you can still make it delicious. We actually had a menu a year ago we called Mixology Eye Roll, and I just took like a bunch of 80s cocktails and I made them really good, like using the best ingredients, fine-tuned them, and killer, right? Grasshoppers and things like that, but just using really, really good ingredients, and it makes a big difference.
Somebody said they judge bars on how well they do in old-fashioned, so I think a lot of us do. The one last question I saw come in before we get to the next cocktail is somebody said that their shaker seems to leak no matter how good of a seal they think they have on it. Are there any tips on? There are. The question here is, well, what kind of a shaker tin you have? But on average, if your shaker leaks, get a new one. So you might just have like a cheap, especially with the 3 pieces, they're notoriously bad if you get a cheap version. These ones are always like just the tin on tins. They tend to be better, but it really depends on the material.
and the seal. So if you have a tin on tin or a Boston style, make sure you go in with an angle and do a slight tap. And when you shake hard, it should vacuum seal it. If it doesn't do that, just get a different one. That's my advice. So these ones, like I said, you can get them for fairly cheap. I would not consider buying anything less than $20 when I look at a nice cobbler. 20, 30, I will spend easily on that. Just because I know what I get is nice quality. You can use Cocktail Kingdom products. This one is a whiskey product. And they're good. They work. They don't get stuck. I've had friends give me like vintage ones they found in like Goodwills, and I'm like, make one drink and can never open it again. And I'm like, okay, into the trash you go. That's just how it is.
Somebody said that they're not the biggest fan of coriander or cardamom, but the mix of the syrup makes this gin and drink taste really great. So I feel like if you can make something that somebody typically doesn't like taste great, add gin.
Oh, and so I wanted to bring it back real quick to. So as you see, I changed the name of the cocktail to Southeast Side, and it makes sense because a lot of these flavors come from Southeast Asia. And what I used, I added the cardamom, and the flavor profile that comes through here is very, very spice heavy. Hence the name change, because I changed the recipe a little bit and I changed the name just a little bit to really reflect what it's going to bring to the plate. So, if you don't have any more questions, I will jump into our next drink, which is going to be wildly different.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Let's get crazy. Okay. So our next drink is called the Spice Route or Spice Fruit, however you want to pronounce it. And I really got the idea just from the Opihr gin itself, because the whole story goes around the spice route and how the spices went from India and Southeast Asia countries to Europe and worldwide. So it's a big part of this gin story and flavor profile as well. And I wanted to build on that. So there isn't contrasting flavors here. I really added more flavors from that side of the world to it. So spice route it is. So if you have seen the recipe and the ingredients, you can clearly tell that this is a variation of a martini technically. It is gin-based with martini, bitters, and an extra addition of turmeric liqueur. So whenever we talk about martinis, we have to talk about vermouth. So gin and vermouth, they are the couple that got together in high school, and then they went to the prom together, and then now they're 60 and they have like 75 75 grandkids running around, and they're still in love, and everybody loves them together. They're the sweetest couple on the block. And that's just how compatible those two ingredients are. My only thing when I tell people, when they talk about gin and vermouth together, is I'm like, just make sure you add enough vermouth. I'm not saying that super bone dry martinis are a bad thing, but if it's a good vermouth, it is delicious and they complement each other. And honestly, if you look at different variations of martinis, like a Martinez, wet martinis, there's a huge range of how the ratios move. You can have a Martinez style cocktail, which is way more vermouth heavy. You can have a dry martini, which has a 1/4 ounce of vermouth, or someone just like waves the bottle towards the glass. There's no vermouth in there. But it always works because how compatible they are. So for me, sometimes when I'm really lazy, I will just take a glass, I will put some ice in it, and I will take a splash of gin and a splash of vermouth, and I give it a quick stir, and I enjoy it. Because that's how compatible they are. My favorite thing to do with people who say they don't like vermouth, I usually give them a taste of a Bianco vermouth, or not a dry vermouth, but a white vermouth. Because dry vermouth is a little bit more esoteric, especially when you have a bit of a sweeter palate. But I have not seen a person yet who says, I hate vermouth, and I give them a taste of Dolin Blanc, for example. I'm like, tell me that again. And they're all like, this is vermouth? I'm like, yes, it is. It's delicious. So for today's cocktail, I am using a blend of 2 different vermouths. So they're both by Carpano, which is a pretty well-known brand. You might have definitely seen the Carpano Antica, which is their more of an expensive red variation. But their whole lineup is absolutely fabulous. And I'm using their Carpano Bianco and a Carpano Dry, which translates to white vermouth and dry vermouth. And I just wanted to give a little bit more body to the cocktail by using a mixture of both vermouths, and just a bit more complexity as well. And then we have, I should bring the bottle out. Like I said, going with the flavors of the spice route, this is Kuma turmeric liqueur, which is actually locally produced. Wonderful product. I love using it as almost like a bitter sometimes in different cocktails. So in this cocktail, it is almost the same amount as using bitters. And as far as bitters go, we have the Regan's orange bitters, because I love, once again, they're more spice heavy. There's a lot of cinnamon in those bitters. So once again, it adds to all of that spice that comes from the gin. So we're really going to amplify that, and it's going to turn out to this really different, savory, almost like a meal kind of a cocktail. So very excited for this. And then we're going to garnish it with kaffir lime leaf, which once again ties in all the Southeast Asian, those flavors that are in that region. So without further ado, I mean, I'll take a few questions if anything came up. But otherwise, we can slowly start stirring this cocktail.
We have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One, somebody asked if the Southeast side was available at the tin table if they were just to stop in to get another one.
Yes, for another week or so it is.
Okay, so it's not constantly, but for the time being, basically what we're saying is go there now.
Get it now. Get it while it's here.
And then another person asked, what ingredients or flavors tend to work well with gin, and does it depend on the tasting notes? Which I know how you're going to answer. So maybe we should talk about the flavors that go well with Opihr.
Yes. Like I said, as I mentioned before, gin it just goes with so many different things. Vermouth, sour things, fruity things, savory things. It's very, very forgiving. There are certain things, like I would say, don't use Baileys. That's probably a hard pass. I think coffee liqueur is a hard pass. But think, berries, fruits, like they all go with it. You know, you can make a really simple sour. So there's a lot of leeway here. With Opihr, like I said, always the flavors that I'm bringing out together with this gin, with all these cocktails, always to work with it. And like Amy mentioned, make it just simple gin and tonic, because it really shines. Like, the cubeb berry, the pepper really jumps out. The cardamom, like it. Sometimes the easiest thing to kind of appreciate the ingredients is keeping it simple. Like, and we say it a lot in bartending as well. You know, whenever I start playing around with a cocktail, you know, if I kind of think I want to make a sour style cocktail, or like a daisy style cocktail when I use juice, I will just make a sour and just see how it acts in it, and see how does a lemon or lime juice what does it elevate, what kind of hides a little bit, kind of gives me idea. I would this in a Negroni, done. All day, you know. When you're talking about a big gin that has a lot of flavor, and this one definitely has some botanicals that really jump out and make it unique, using it in a big, powerful cocktail, you will really see how those flavors stand up to the Campari and Vermouth. I mean, it's just like, it's completely different. It's wild.
And then somebody asked about, what is your favorite Vermouth brand? Tough question, I know. I
know. I don't play favorites a whole lot. It's just... okay, so off the top of my head, I'm going to give you three. Carpano right here, Mancino, and Dom. So those will be my three top brands. And they're quite different in flavor profiles. One of my favorite drinks I love just Bianco white vermouth on the rocks, and both Dolin, Dolin, Carpano, and Mancino all put out a magnificent range. So I would just go with those three brands, and you can almost never go wrong.
Yeah. Somebody else just commented, not a question this time, that they had a gin cocktail that used a bell pepper shrub, and it had the taste of a margarita.
You did not get that at tin table, that's for sure. Because I actually had a bell pepper shrub just very recently. Well, sorry, a year ago when we were still open, because I love bell pepper, so I made a shrub out of it. And I even made a drink. I just forget what I put in. If it tastes like a margarita, I honestly don't know. The only thing I can think of is there might have been tequila in there, and having kind of that earthiness I might get from bell pepper that might come across as a margarita.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I can think of. But I would have to taste it to judge it with my palate or whatever. Not.
All right.
Wait, where did they get it? I would like to know where they get it from.
We will see. I'll keep you updated.
Sounds
but
good.
For now, I think we've covered all of the comments in the chat so far.
Okay. Well, let's go make a martini variation, aka the spice route. So once again, I'm going to play along with y'all. It's very simple. All you really have to do is we'll take the first. Once again, ice goes in last. We'll start with the gin, just whatever you have left in your little Opihr bottle. Pour it in here, just about 2 ounces. My preferred way of method is to make a martini is I like 2-to-1 ratio. I like 2 parts of gin and 1 part of vermouth. That's just kind of my go-to. Sometimes we'll do 50-50 equal parts. For this recipe, we will have 2 parts gin and 1 part vermouth. Well, technically half part of each vermouth. Together they will make 1 ounce. And even if you haven't poured them in yet, if you're not super familiar with the vermouth, just take a little sip. Once again, nobody can see you. No one's judging you here. I want you to experience this. Just try them out. Have a little sip of the dry, have a little sip of the Bianco, and just kind of see what flavors they bring to this expedition. So good. Definitely like citrus notes, the minerality, acidity. You always get a little bit of acidity with the vermouths as well because they are wine-based. Yeah, more like definitely the Bianco is more like spice forward, a little cocoa. Really, really nice. And then what we have left here is 2 tiny little bottles with a pipette on the side. And so this is where I actually want to give you all a little opportunity to play around with this cocktail at your house as well. So both of these, take 1 pipette full of each of these ingredients and put it in the drink. And once we have done, so you should have some left over in here. Make sure you have let's say half of it in here. And once we have made this drink and poured into a glass, take a few sips and see if adding one of these 2, like a little bit more kuma or a little bit more of the bitters, how it changes that cocktail. And maybe you'll find that, oh, I like to have mine with more bitters, or I like to have a bit more of the turmeric in there. So once again, you can just dump it all in there. It's up to you. I'm just going to go to the same thing. I'm going to go half and half, going to take half of it in here. And once again, feel free to take a little sip and try all these ingredients on their own as well. It definitely takes a lot of time to and just experience and tasting things and trying to figure out how they will act together. But you can't really tell what things bring to the cocktail unless you've tried them on their own as well. It's like if you add a strawberry to an apricot pie, if you haven't tasted the strawberry ever, you don't really know what it brings to the plate, right? The pie just tastes like a pie to you. Okay, so I hope everyone has their ingredients in here.
Real quick.
Yep.
I see a couple of questions coming up. They're putting both bottles of the vermouth in.
Correct.
And all of those bottles.
Yes.
The full bottle. Okay.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're both half an ounce, so together they will make 1 ounce.
Got
so
it.
2 ounce gin, 1 ounce all together of vermouth.
All right.
And while you still finish putting everything together, I will just talk about this wonderful tool here, which is a bar spoon. So I always want to have enough length. So this is about almost 15 inches, I believe. And the reason for that is it's so much easier to stir with this than a small spoon. If you don't have a spoon, chopsticks work really well. Butter knife actually works really, really well. I have done this where I just put ice in it and I'm like, all right, nothing else goes today. I'm just going to do this trick here in my hand and they will kind of get the job done, not quite as well. And once again, definitely get one of these for your house. They don't cost a whole lot. $10 to $15 is usually what they run for. Or you can spend I'm not even going to tell you how much money I spent this custom-made bomb with an octopus head on the top here. I just don't want to tell you. Sometimes you do impulse buys that the next day you think about it like, why did I do this? Or you can have one that looks like a finger. This is in the honor of Gary Regan, as a very well-known mixologist, historian. He's wrote many books. He passed away just a couple of years ago, and he's I can't say gimmick, but one of his signature moves was he made a Negroni and stirred it with his finger. So Cocktail Kingdom made this bar spoon, which is made after his finger in his honor. Cool little piece of history. All right, so I hope everyone's already caught up. So we're gonna move into this stirring action here. Nice. So whenever you put ice in here, just make sure at least it covers all of the drink. So if the drink comes above the ice, add a little bit more. It just makes sure that you have a sufficient amount of ice in there so it actually dilutes enough. And with stirring, we want to go a little bit longer than shaking. One of the bigger differences between stirring and shaking is just so much more violent and so much faster. So your drink will cool down very, very rapidly. And it's all about repetition and how fast it moves back and forth. And also with shaking, you really break a lot of the shards off from the ice cubes. That will really speed up the dilution as well. So technically, when you're done with your 10-second shake, your cocktail is going to be lower than freezing temperature because there's alcohol in it, and that actually allows it. Same with salt water; it can drop below freezing temperatures, but it won't freeze. With stirring, you'll almost never get there. It just doesn't work that way. So, and the other big key difference is because stirring, it takes a little bit longer, but it doesn't dilute it as much. You actually taste more. Because the colder something is, the less you will taste. And that's just how it is. You can literally take the same drink, like just try it out once with a martini even. Whenever you're ready, pour your drink into a coupe or a rocks glass, whatever you wish. Just try it out once. Take a martini and just do the exact same amount of ice, the exact same amount of ingredients, shake one and stir one, and just try them right side by side. And you can see how vastly different they are. Because the shake and drink will inevitably be so much colder, and the texture is going to be a little bit different, that you will definitely taste less of the gin. You'll probably have more highlighted one-noted experience. You will probably have a lot more juniper, for example, jump out, depending on the gin. Versus when you stir it, because it is a lower temperature, a higher temperature, it allows the flavors to come out quite a bit more. And now, you should all have a kaffir lime leaf there. I hope they all survived. I know that they're usually very, very sturdy leaves. And what I do is I'll cut a slit somewhere in there. You can go do a diagonal thing. And that also, you can muddle it a little bit. So you can take a little slit like here in the middle. You can do it on the side, wherever you want to do it. And that really releases a lot of those aromas. And I will just kind of go just around the glass. So where I had the little slit, to kind of have some of the aroma a bit on the side of the rim as well. And then I'll try to place it somewhere over here. You can use the same technique I used before with the lime wheel as well, where you bend it in half and then cut from this side. And once again, you can just like attach it to the side of the glass. So the same technique works with a lot of things that are leafy or round. So once again, you just have a little slit here, and it allows me to put it here in such a manner that it doesn't fall off.
That looks delicious.
All right, and then have a taste and just like experience this with me, because it's a wild drink.
While you're taking your taste and everybody's catching up, I have some bad news about the bell pepper cocktail. Bell pepper shrub cocktail.
It wasn't real.
It was real. It came from branch water.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think I know people who work there, so I can reach out to them and ask.
Yes, please do.
Okay, I'm gonna add a little bit more kuma to mine.
So kuma is the bottle labeled with the K.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And it is this turmeric liqueur. So yes, labeled with the K. So I added the rest of this kuma in here to add a little bit more of the turmeric note. So yeah, I hope it really comes through like how spice forward this is. You know, once again, you get some of the same notes you would get from this from the sour variation that we did earlier, but there's so much more here. And I really feel like just that turmeric and a bit of that the cinnamon coming from the bitters as well, it really kind of makes it I can't say a curry, but it almost reminds me of food with the amount of spice that you get in here. And this is not a pounder, like the South side is like, yeah, you can like just kind of blink and it's gone, right? You're like, what? I don't know what happened. This is like every sip is like an adventure.
Somebody just described it as having tons of layers, which I think is a really good description of that.
Yeah, it just keeps giving. There's so much. Like all the little spices that come through here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't call this cocktail like super risky, but I kind of wanted to take just reading about Joanne and how she approaches making this, like for example, this gin and bloom is like, like she said, is like you want to take a little risk sometimes. You want to experiment and you want to go somewhere where maybe people haven't gone before, and that's the same thing goes into cocktails and cooking the same way, because sometimes making a drink and putting it on a menu, for example, has the same thing where you're like, well, I think it's a little weird. Like, I love it. I think the flavors are cool, but it's not really going to fit for everybody. And you always have a little bit of that element, and that's kind of taking that risk. And sometimes a cocktail that's really fun and interesting, it's not going to be my favorite cocktail. And it's not about that, but it's like experiencing something like, oh, this is cool. Like, I didn't really even thought about this flavor combination. So there's just different ways to look about how you make a drink. And in our profession, being a bartender, that really comes into play is I call it flavor profiling. When people come in and they order a drink, I really just try to gauge them and see what they actually like. Because if they do not like stirred complex cocktails, I would never serve them this. I mean, it might go over really well, but you never know. So it's like I said, there's always a little bit of like taking a risk and trying things out, experimenting, and like I said, maybe some of you are drinking this right now, and it's like, meh, I don't care for it, but I really like the first one. Or like I tried it with tonic, and that's the best way to drink this gin. And guess what? You are not wrong about anything. It is a lot about what you like, what you're familiar with, and what do you feel like today.
So I'm seeing in the chat, somebody asked if they wanted to order this, what do they ask for?
The spice route.
So yeah, so is the
cheeky answer there
available at the tin table, or if they wanted something similar someplace else, they're not gonna like. What would you suggest as something similar?
Yeah, I mean, this is a clear variation of a martini, so I would just ask for a variation of a martini. Like think a bit more complex than just like one vermouth, and have your bartender go with that. And you could just say, I like it on the drier side, and you can add a little bit of sweetness to it, because this is what it is. It's just a variation on a martini.
And speaking of adding things, someone wrote that they added some more orange bitters, which created another layer, not a little bit. It created another layer. So if you have final comments or questions or cocktail questions, or you name it, we have the expert here. So put them in the chat. We also want to hear what you think of both cocktails. Did you have a favorite? And share that with us before we wrap up. And while this class was happening, I have been looking at social media a little bit. And thank you to everybody that posted about the class. And it looks like you're having a lot of fun at home. It's my gateway to see what's happening on the other side of this YouTube stream, if you will. So I don't see any more chat questions coming in at the moment. Any other thoughts that you had around using Opihr in cocktails?
I think I've wrapped it up pretty well. Like I said, my recommendations, I do enjoy it a bit more with simpler cocktails, maybe without lemon juice. As I found, as I mentioned before, it really depends how drinks play. But I found that using a good amount of lime juice, for example, in the southeast side, or sour variation, it kind of tends to hide some of the spices in here and elevates certain ones that are big and powerful. So the main things that once I shake it, I really get a lot of cumin and pepper and cardamom. Like those things really jump out. Versus having a stirred variation of this, you really have so much more for the other flavors to play around. So especially with this gin, like I would definitely think a bit more of like think simple, think stir. Like I said, even as a gin and tonic, I know that the head distiller, like she says, try with ginger ale. I have not tried this, but I guess I will. I just want to see what it brings to the table. Just trying it with the ginger ale.
It's amazing what's coming in the chat because I'm not a math magician by any means, but it seems about 50-50 of which cocktail people liked more. So,
Oh, interesting.
and yeah, people are saying they're definitely getting some for at home soon. And yeah, I am guessing that people are quite happy with the cocktails. Your cocktails
Awesome.
are always super delicious. Somebody even wrote they don't normally like martinis, but they're very much enjoying the spice route. So
Very good.
Yeah, there's some good things happening in here. So we're gonna send out what was mixed tonight, so everybody will have those recipes to make them at home. And if you want to have some company while you're drinking those, the rest of your cocktails, we're going to end this stream, but the Seattle Cocktail Club, if you're a Seattle Cocktail Club member, you can hop on the Discord and we will continue with the little happy hour there. Just hang out, and that way you're not sitting at home drinking alone if you care to join us. And that said, we are going to wrap this up. Do you have any last minute thoughts for everybody that's making cocktails at home?
Oh yeah, I want to do shameless plugs, obviously about me.
Please do.
I also own a cocktail a workshop company. It's called Shake, Stir, Savor. So please go on Instagram or Facebook or go to my website. I mean, you can follow me on my website, but do go check it out. But definitely go on Instagram, on our Facebook, like and follow and all the good stuff. I would love to have you. And then once we open up this place more, I would love to see you all at the Tin Table. And I'm really hoping we can do some more events coming up with Seattle Cocktail Week in the club. So yeah, I hope to see you all soon. Thank you.
Thanks again. And we will see everybody out there very soon.